Chapter 56. It's so easy to destroy what you do not understand. Tell me, how do you feel when you stare at your blood-stained hand? Hurry up, I don't want to miss the last bus. Jenny pulled her jacket tighter around her. She had been too optimistic when she got dressed. She had forgotten how freezing cold January could be. There's no point, Keva mumbled. We'll never get there in time. Of course we will. We'll just take the shortcut through Nordstan. She increased the pace. Since she didn't look at him, she didn't see his hesitation, his worried face. And being a born and bred Swede, she had never experienced Sweden's leading shopping centre, as Nordstan was known, the way he, a black-haired immigrant, had. We can't go through Nordstan when the shops are closed. It's not safe. Oh, come on. I always go through here. The only people who are here at night are a bunch of old drunkards. He shook his head. No, Jenny, there can be really dangerous people here as well. Stop being ridiculous and hurry up. She ran across the street and through the doors to the mall. He could either follow her or leave her there alone. The latter was unthinkable. With a feeling that an abyss lay before him, he followed her. Jenny, who was still walking at high speed, grinned at him as he caught up. See? There's nothing dangerous here. With his jaw clenched and a dry mouth, he looked around vigilantly. There was a teenager puking on the floor and a dirty woman asking passers-by for money. For the rest, it looked mostly like people who, like them, were just passing through. The muscles in his face relaxed. When they turned off to the right towards the buses at Nils Eriksson, he thought they had made it. He thought they were safe. That's when he saw them. 4 people who looked at them, happy to have found a rat to play with. 3 of them had shaved their heads. All 4 had black boots. He felt paralyzing fear. Instinctively, he reached for Jenny, but she was several steps ahead. Hey, fucking wog! The person who had shouted was tall and skinny. He was Kevan's age. In a strange, detached way, Kevan noticed that they had all boots with steel caps. You should stay the fuck away from our girls, you fucking Arab! Without warning, a short, dark-haired guy with heavy stubble kicked Kevan in the neck, just below his ear. Kevan smashed against the hard floor. No! Only now had Jenny realized the danger. Leave him alone! She ran towards him, the fear shooting from her eyes. He tried to sit up, seeing in a blur how the tall, skinny guy brutally grabbed her arm and twisted it behind her back. At the same time, Kevan saw out of the corner of his eye that another boot was coming towards him. He pulled up his arms, trying to protect his head. When the boot hit his chest instead, he felt an indescribable pain. A rib must have been broken. The next kick was directed at his crotch, and he screamed louder than he ever had. Still, his screams were nothing compared to Jenny's. Her scream was heartbreaking and so loud that the whole of Gothenburg should have heard it. But even though it was heard, and even though there were people nearby, no one helped. 2 men in their 30s looked toward them, but hurried on. Kevan hoped that they would at least call the police. Jenny's arm was twisted and it felt like it could break any second, but it didn't stop her. She saw what was about to happen. She saw that her boyfriend was being battered, maybe to death. She kicked, screamed and bit to get away from the guy holding her, so she could get between Kevan and the devastating kicks and punches. It was like a nightmare, like a horror movie. She could not believe this was actually happening. Her senses were suddenly sharper than ever, and it was as if she saw everything with a special vision, one that made everything extremely clear. She saw the racists' every movement, every grimace on their hateful faces. She saw Kevan's limp, unprotected body. He was unconscious by now, unable to defend himself at all. She saw how his head was kicked repeatedly. With blinding clarity, she saw them kicking him to death. She screamed and struggled to get free. There were 2 of them holding her now. She got hit in her face, but she felt no pain. She had to reach Kevan's lifeless body. She had to. Was he already dead? They called her wog, whore, cunt, and all kinds of words that meant nothing to her. She had to get to him before it was too late. Was it already too late? They tore her blouse to shreds, held her breasts so hard they bruised. Again she screamed, and suddenly one of them let go. With a thump, he fell to the ground with his hands pressed against his neck. Let her go. The guy who still held her turned himself and Jenny towards the voice that didn't scream, yet was strangely loud in the midst of the horror. In front of them, there was a guy with black long hair and black leather clothes. His eyes were ice cold. I said, let her go. She heard how the kicks and punches stopped. Please, God, let him be alive. Let him be alive. A second later, the black-haired guy was just in front of them and Jenny was suddenly free. She didn't know what had happened and she didn't care. She ran towards Kevan. The guy who had twisted her arm during all this time stumbled with one hand pressed against his arm. Blood, lots of it, poured from between his fingers. He has a knife! When Jenny arrived at Kevan, all their attackers had their attention on the black-clad guy. Jenny put her trembling fingers against Kevan's neck to feel his pulse. She was shaking wildly and her own heart was beating so hard she couldn't possibly determine whether or not Kevan had a pulse. Behind her, the two attackers, who were still unharmed, ran toward the leather-clad man. He didn't wait for them, but ran straight towards them and head-butted the guy with the stubble so that he fell head over heels to the ground with a broken, bleeding nose. Then the leather-clad guy kicked him in the crotch, the way he had kicked Kevan just minutes ago. The guy who remained, a pale and round guy, kicked at their rescuer, but he saw the kick, threw himself on the ground and grabbed the other leg of the pale guy. He pulled it towards him so his opponent lost his balance and dropped to the ground. Without hesitation, the leather-clad guy grabbed the arm of the pale guy, twisted it, and crushed his elbow with his foot. The cracking sound confirmed that it was broken. The four assailants were all conscious, but too injured to continue the fight with the black hero. For a few seconds, there was a deafening, strange silence. Then, finally, sirens were heard. Policemen came running. Ambulance! Jenny screamed toward the running feet. We need an ambulance! He's dying! My Kevan is dying! What happened next was a strange contrast to the time she had just spent in hell. Suddenly there were many police and medical personnel there. They rapidly and efficiently determined who was most urgently in need of care, Kevan, and put him on a stretcher to quickly examine him. Likely concussion, jaw fractures, broken ribs. He needs to get to the ICU immediately. What about the others? Another person, a woman, examined the others who were injured. A broken arm, a knife wound in the arm, not too deep, a broken nose, and one with a neck injury. How are you? Are you injured? Hello, how are you? It took seconds before Jenny understood they were talking to her. What? I'm not hurt. Kevan is hurt. Take care of him. Will he survive? We'll take care of him. We need the ambulance for everyone else here, but you should go to Sahlgrenska hospital for a checkup. Is that where you take him? To Sahlgrenska? Yes, we'll take him there. Can I come along in the ambulance? A police officer came to her and shook his head. Unfortunately, we need to talk to you first. Suddenly, there were at least 6 policemen there. 10 minutes ago, there had been none. Why weren't you here a quarter of an hour ago? Jenny screamed and shivered so hard she could barely stand. We're leaving now. The ambulance nurse looked at Jenny and at the policeman. Please make sure she gets to the hospital afterwards. She may be in shock. The policeman nodded, but didn't look like he was listening. He asked Jenny what had happened, and Jenny had to describe the number of blows and who had done what. It was difficult because even when it was happening, everything had seemed like a hallucination. Now, afterwards, it felt even more unreal. She had a feeling Kevan would put his arm around her any moment and say, "Come on, let's go home." She realized that he might never say that again, and a big lump blocked her chest. So, the ones who attacked your boyfriend were the 4 who were here when we arrived. Jenny nodded and breathed in short gasps. The lump made it impossible to fill her lungs with air. Was that a yes? What a fucking idiot. After a few more short breaths, she decided to answer the questions as quickly as possible so she could get to the hospital and to Kevan. Yes. Why did they attack you? Because of complete lack of brains. Excuse me? They called him a wog and me a wog whore. What do you think? They all had shaved heads and wore boots with steel caps. How many clues do you need? Did you talk to them before the assault? We didn't even see them. We were in a hurry to catch a bus. Did you talk to them before the attack? Talk to them? What? Have a discussion with them about integration and racism? Of course not. So they attacked you as soon as you saw them. They kicked Kayvan first. I was ahead of him. When I noticed, I ran back and another guy held me. Which of the four kicked Kaylan? Kayvan and not Kaylan. Who kicked your boyfriend? Jenny heard traces of annoyance in the young policeman's voice. I didn't see who kicked him first. Who held you? In the beginning only the tall one, then one more, but I never looked at him. The first one was the one who got stabbed. Yes. And meanwhile, did the other two continue to kick and beat your boyfriend? Yes. Who stabbed the man who was holding you? Jenny opened her mouth but then hesitated. She looked around. Where had he gone? Where was their long-haired rescuer? I don't know. Did you or your boyfriend have a knife? She looked at him indignantly. No, neither I nor Kayvan managed to hurt these idiots. I wish I had hurt them, but I couldn't. So who? I don't know who it was. He just showed up, but now he has disappeared again. Can you describe him? The policeman sounded eager. She didn't like him. Not at all. The long hair, the icy, steel grey eyes, the black leather clothes were engraved on her retina. He had saved them. A complete stranger had risked his own life to save them. No, Jenny said slowly. I never saw him. I was too busy helping Kayvan.